Hello, CSL. Welcome back to the CSL videocast. I'm here today to talk about the world of the playoffs and the first round matchups, as well as the award season has begun underway, and talk about the voting for that. And today it's not just me on this episode. I'm joined by the Detroit Pistons general manager and the co-commissioner, I believe is the right word. Drummer, how's everything going?
Good. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, co-commissioner, something like that. I let Miles do all the heavy lifting. I'm just
exactly.
there for fun.
Exactly. Yeah, you just let Miles get on with it, and then you sit in the background and take the title. Is that how it works this year?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. I get all the acclaim, and Miles does all the hard work. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Good. So, yeah, should we get straight in and talk about the playoffs first round matchups and see how things are going and where we kind of see things panning out for the various series. You should see up on the screen that we've got the sim results sort of thread up to give an overview, and I think we could probably just start by starting at the top and working our way down, really. So the Wizards Heat series is obviously going the way most people predicted, in that Miami are 2-0 up after the first couple of games. And I mean, John, do you see anything changing in this series? Do you think the Wizards can sort of make a comeback at home, or do you think this one's probably dead and buried already?
Yeah, these 1-8 matchups and so on, they're kind of tough. But we saw last year that it can happen and the 8 can win. But the Heat are one of the top teams in the league. They're young. They're going to be here for a long time. I do think they took a little bit of a step back from last year, so I don't know that I have them coming out of the East this year. And the Wizards, Gary made some good moves at the end of the year to kind of get that rotation settled, and they started playing pretty well after that. I just don't think they have the firepower. I think they need to change something up with their strats and kind of go crazy, which I think Gary said, or he alluded to, that he was going to do in the Facebook thread. But I don't know that it's going to make too much of a difference versus a team like the Heat.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Gary pretty much summed up very well on the threads, in that this Miami Heat team is probably the worst matchup for his Wizards team, in that the weaknesses that the Wizards have, the Heat have massive positive strengths in there, and where the Wizards have strengths, the Heat can quite easily negate them. And I think for me, the disappointing thing in this series, probably me being slightly biased, is that the Wizards haven't started Al Horford. I know he's getting up there in age, but he still, for me, is a better starting center than throwing in someone like Greg Monroe against Simmons. I feel that Horford would hold his own a lot better and probably cause a few more questions of the Heat. But I mean, the way it's panning out, can you see the Wizards getting a single win at all, or do you think this is a straight sweep for the Miami Heat?
I actually think they could pull out a win potentially too at home. But I also wouldn't be surprised if it's a sweep. Like you said, I don't like John Henson starting either. I don't know why Gary's not putting more time on Horford. I know his endurance isn't what it used to be, but he can still put in a lot of time and is better than a younger John Henson. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what comes. Game 3 is going to be huge for them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these series, Game 3 is going to be huge for a lot of the Eastern matchups, really. But one that isn't possibly going to be a massive Game 3, although you could probably argue it is, because it might twist the series another way again. But the next one down, the Cleveland Cavaliers against the Boston Celtics. Celtics, with their young dominant team, have been kind of coasting most of the season against an experienced veteran GM and team in Cleveland. How do you see the next one going for this series?
Yeah, this is big. I mean, Cleveland stealing one on the road against Boston is huge. And Josh is a vet GM. He knows what he's doing with his strategy for his team. He built up a pretty good defensive team even after shipping off Kyrie. So it's not a great matchup for Dennis, even though he's a 2 seed, unfortunately. But and I mean, it's all going to come down to these next 2 games. If Cleveland can put the pressure on Boston and maintain that home court that they now have, um, it's going to put Dennis in a tough spot with this team. But Cleveland has the firepower. They still have Blake, Alfred Payton, Steph Curry. Like, he can't really zone them with Doug McDermott and Steph Curry on the team. So it's a tough team to beat. Credit to Josh.
Yeah, I have to say, probably a lot of people have written off the Cavaliers because of some of the moves they've made. But yeah, like you said, they've still got firepower. They've still got defense they can throw at a team like the Celtics. And for me, I think this is kind of the moment that I expect Dennis and this team to kind of either sink or swim, really. We can still put it down to his team still being young and talented, and that probably might be the reason why they're shaking a little bit. But for me, it kind of feels like this is the moment where I expect to see the real Boston Celtics and the hype. And I mean, it's a good test for them against Cleveland, as we've mentioned, with experienced GM, knows what he's doing, a team that causes problems. And I mean, for me, I could see this one going to 7 now, just after 2 games. I mean, do you see that, or do you still see the Celtics or even Cleveland pulling out ahead earlier?
I mean, I think Dennis is going to take it in 6 or 7. I still think he has a young team. Depending on how these playoffs go, I would love to see him make a move like BT made with him a couple seasons ago, to trade some of his youth to get a star like Westbrook to put him over the top and get that championship. But it depends how this goes. If Dennis can win a championship with this team, then hey, more power to him. But I would love to see a star on that team, just kind of put them over the top, cash in on some of those assets.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably argue they have a star already in Fox. But yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. They probably need, you're kind of saying you'd like to see them pick up an experienced franchise star, really, off of another team, and just really take them on to, that elite level, I guess, is what we're talking about. But I mean, for me personally, I still see the Celtics getting out of this one because of the talent they have, but it's going to go down to 7, I think.
Yeah.
I expect Cleveland to cause matchup problems, to keep nagging away. I mean, personally, I don't know about you, but I see Cleveland winning both games at home and taking 3-1, and then Celtics pulling back to 3-3 at home, and then it just going down to that final game. I can see both teams holding home court advantage, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
yeah, and depending on how Josh adjusts and Dennis adjusts, I mean, I could see Cleveland winning. But
yeah, exactly. And then, let's move on to the next one, I guess. So we're kind of saying Heat, Celtics, probably, although Celtics Cavs will be tight. Moving on to your series now, the Bulls against the Pistons. I mean, you're 2-0 up already. Granted, we know Marcus changed his depth chart for the first game, didn't get around to the second game because of the tight turnaround. So that probably had a slight impact. But I mean, you must be sitting pretty happy at the moment in taking an early 2-0 lead against a rejuvenated Chicago Bulls side.
yeah, I mean, I still expect this series to go 7 games. Marcos is one of the top GMs and coaches in the league, and he built himself a good team. My team still, I still don't have a ton of confidence in my team. We've been playing a lot better since that Terry Rozier trade. For whatever reason, they just took off after that. And I kind of have the rotation where I want it, but I still think the Chicago roster is more talented when I look at them. So it's going to take some throughout these entire playoffs. It's going to take some crazy things to get me far, but I'm happy to be up 2-0. I could see Chicago taking this in 7. I could see us taking it in 7. This one's kind of still up in the air in my opinion. So
yeah, I mean, I guess just from a neutral observer for this one, really, it's interesting for me that you're still quite deep in rotation for the playoffs, which is you don't tend to see that from a lot of teams now. You tend to see the rotations tighten up a little bit. And just looking, the box scores that I've got on the screen, I mean, you've got obviously a clear starting five, but then beyond that, you've got a mixture of guys playing anywhere from sort of 12 to 25 minutes, really, depending on each night. Is that kind of the plan, is to stay that deep, or is it a case of, you've got some young guys, you've got some specialists, if you can call them that you need to kind of plug in and around, rather than a definitive sort of bench of like two guys that some teams have?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I've always played pretty heavy minutes in the playoffs, but with this team, I mean, but outside of Randall and Murray, who I'm still not giving huge minutes to, but I'm giving them pretty significant minutes. I'm kind of giving it to my specialists to kind of say, okay, lock down Dame, and then let the rest of the team kind of do what they need to do. So we have a lot of good 3-point shooters now, which helps. Like Arch is huge for us. Nick, he had a bad game in game 2, but in game 1, obviously he came out big. So my goal this offseason was limit. I don't want to get zoned ever again. That's kind of the kind of players we targeted, and we'll see how far that gets us.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I view sort of the Pistons now really as this team that I don't really know necessarily how your identity is going to be going forward, because I think that's still evolving. And it's interesting to look at these first 2 games in the playoffs, and you talk about 3-point shooting, and it's kind of signifying that that's the way you're going to go. But I don't think it's quite there yet. It's just, for me, it's interesting because I expected Chicago, and I still expect Chicago to put up more of a fight against you. And if I'd have had to have marked this as a series where the underdog, slight underdog would have come through, it would have been this one. So, I mean, good for you guys that you're 2-0 up at the moment and, firing through. And I definitely didn't expect that.
Yeah, hopefully we can keep it up, but Marcos is a good GM, so
yeah, it's going to be a fascinating matchup, because you're both veteran GMs, experienced and successful GMs. So it's not over yet, but fantastic start for you guys. Should we take a look at the last Eastern Conference matchup then? The Toronto Raptors against the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks are the CSL's in-form team, really, going into this playoffs. 10-0 heading in. The Raptors are kind of one of the teams that were not really in any form going into the playoffs. Had a bit of a bumpy season under their new GM Black Ice, and kind of signifying it at the moment with the Hawks being 2-0 up. Where do you kind of see this one going? Do you see the Hawks just rampaging through with the form they're in, or do you think the Raptors, with some of their talent, will be able to pull this one back?
So I'm a huge Hawks fan. I think Andy's done a great job since he's joined the league. I kind of follow all the teams a little bit, especially in the Eastern Conference, a little closely through the year, just to see if it does come playoffs, how I would match up against them. And since Andy's been here, the last month he's probably, his team is always the hottest in the last month. And the 2 previous seasons, he was so far out of it that he couldn't get into the playoffs. But this season, he got into the playoffs. His team's firing on all cylinders. I wouldn't be surprised if the Hawks honestly come out of the East with how he put them together. But for whatever reason, every season they start off pretty good, and then they go through this big lull and drop games. And then I don't know if he changes something up and the team just plays great. But I would be scared to play the Hawks right now. So I think they're going to win pretty handedly, to be quite honest.
I do agree with you. For me, I see the Hawks as the Eastern Conference equivalent of the Portland Trailblazers, my team. That's how I view them. In that they're a team that rely a lot on form and just on makeup and balance. I mean, you look at some of the players they've got. Yes, they have talent. They have Exum, Holiday, Whiteside. But then you look at some of the other players, and KCP, Marquez Chris, Trey Burke is playing heavy minutes in the playoffs and has been fantastic for them. What a rejuvenation of a CSL career in Burke. Jokic, obviously picking up Michael Young was a steal in the last draft. Guys who, individually are not particularly the best players, but he's done a fantastic job of building a team. around the likes of Exum and Whiteside, and yeah, showing its form completely in this playoff series to begin with against the Raptors, who probably on paper are just as talented as them.
Yeah, I mean the Raptors have a good roster. Bi has a good roster. He didn't make too many changes this season, which is not like him. But yeah, I just think Andy has the Hawks firing on all cylinders, and they're going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, I mean for the Raptors, from their side, for them to get anything out of this, they kind of need a little bit more from Kawhi Leonard, really. And I mean he's their star, and he had a terrible first game, and he's come back in the second game, and it looks like the rotation's been tightened up a little bit by the Raptors, but they still couldn't get close to the Hawks, and unfortunately, I think that gap is going to be too much for them. I mean, can you see the Raptors pulling a game back or two, or do you think Hawks, with the form they're in, will just bulldoze over them?
I think they will. They're going home. I think they're going to win probably 1 or 2 games. It might go to Game 6. But I mean, Kawhi Leonard in the CSL is not the current Kawhi Leonard in the NBA, so I don't think they have enough to overtake the Hawks right now.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I guess the question for the Raptors is the off season. What do they do now? Because you look at them last year, they were close to the elite in the Eastern Conference, probably a possible title contender. You know, they haven't made significant moves, but they've just naturally progressed backwards in that Eastern Conference. And you know, do they then think about reshuffling the pack a little bit more?
Yeah, I think they'll have to make that decision because Boston's going to be the top of that division for a while. New York just got the 2 top picks. They're going to start improving. Philly with a GM should be in the playoffs. It's a disgrace that they're not. So the Raptors are kind of not that they're trending down, but they're kind of treading water and staying even, while some of the other teams are going to start trending up. Brooklyn with Adams doing a good job there. So it's a tough division. So they kind of need to make some drastic changes to start trending up,
Yeah,
or rebuild maybe. I don't know.
we'll see where they go. And I tell you, the Hawks. Watch out for the Hawks. I think in the Eastern Conference, they're going to surprise a few people. So should we move on to the Western Conference, and
Yeah, definitely.
the 1-8 matchup there, the OKC against the Golden State Warriors. OKC are 2-0 up, probably expected given they are the title holders at the moment, the reigning champs. I don't know about you, John, but I'm slightly disappointed the Warriors haven't put up more of a fight in this one with some of the experienced star players that they have.
Yeah, I mean Golden State. I mean, no offense to Jeff, but I'm sure he has stuff going on. He hasn't tinkered too much with this lineup, but they have the talent. They're kind of like Dallas, where they have the veteran talent to make a deep playoff push. It's unfortunate they're the 8th seed and didn't maybe pull a better draw because OKC is obviously a powerhouse still. But I don't. They might get swept here. Maybe they'll pull a game off, but unless Jeff does some significant things and changes a couple things, they're just like Jabari Bird. Maybe it's worth putting him in, giving him some more time, but they don't have too much on the bench to really help out, unfortunately.
No, I mean it's difficult. We know they don't have a lot in terms of bench position to move around, but for me, when you've got guys like Harden and Durant, you just need to ramp up their minutes in the playoffs and just go for it, because that's kind of what they're there for. I mean, if you've snuck in as the 8th seed and done a brilliant job in
Yeah,
turning this team around, but if you're not going to play Harden and Durant greater than 36 minutes against a powerhouse, then what are they there for, really?
right.
I mean, given that, I mean, do you see the Warriors pulling anything back, or OKC just going to smash through them and on to the next one for them?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen if Jeff submitted a depth chart and made some changes to his lineup. If he's kind of going to hold steady, like you said, if he doesn't start putting Harden in for 40 plus minutes and Durant, then I could see this kind of being a clean sweep for OKC. They have the veteran presence, they have the talent. Andrew's kind of getting comfortable with where he is with the strategy for his team. So I think it's going to be tough for Golden State to really do much of anything here.
Yeah, and I think if OKC sweep this one, in the extra couple of days rest that they're going to have, if they have any injuries, will certainly help. Because looking at the rest of the matchups in the Western Conference, they're all tied. The first one obviously is the Denver Nuggets, a team that has had a rejuvenation this year. I would say similar to the Hawks, but not necessarily, because of some of them. They've been a bit more aggressive trade wise against the Phoenix Suns, who business as usual for them in the regular season. Back here in the playoffs, tough one to call. I think this one.
Yeah, I think the Suns, Doug is a vet. He knows what he's doing. They're young. I don't think the Suns are going to win it all this year, regardless. But I think they're going to pull it out just because they're loaded. Like, they have so much depth. They're like Miami and Boston, where they have so much depth. They kind of need maybe a consolidation. I don't even know what they need besides just more experience on that team, really, which next year will bring. So I think they're still going to pull it out unless Doug does what he did last year and bows out earlier than he should have. But Miles put together a hell of a team. From top to bottom, getting Andre Drummond was great for him. I love that move. Tatum should be a Detroit Piston, but he's a Nugget, and he's completely tearing up the league, and he's only going to get better. So I think it's gonna be an interesting series. I think the Suns will probably take it in 6. I think Miles will take one at home, and then I think Phoenix will steal one back to kind of take home court, and then just kind of go with it from there. But I'm glad it's a series. I'm glad the Nuggets are doing well. I'm glad for Miles. So
yeah, I agree. I think for me, if there was any matchup I'd watch across the whole of the first round playoffs, this would be the one. The Suns with their just experienced talent, Isaiah Taylor against the Nuggets, who have got some star players in Drummond and Wall, but then you've got Tatum, who's the sort of X factor really. If he can step up in his rookie season and kind of take over in the playoffs. I kind of agree with you. I think the Suns will edge this one out in 6. I think just because of the additional playoff experience that the Suns roster has, will probably help them and get through. I just think that's probably where the edge is. But when we come to this one, probably next year, if they do face each other in the playoffs, it could be a different story. If Denver continue on the projection they are, and Tatum's endurance increases, he can play more minutes, better quality in those minutes as well. It could be a different story. But yeah, fantastic for the Nuggets in terms of the progression they've made this year. But I kind of see the Suns edging through this one just about.
Yeah, I think next year is going to be a big year for the Nuggets, where Miles is going to make probably a couple other moves to shore up that team, and they could maybe be, that top 4 team in the West and make a serious run.
Yeah. So if we move on to the next one, the Dallas Mavericks, who had a stomping end of half year end of season really run for them. New GM come in, just plugged in a lineup that we all knew would work, and pretty much pulled it back through into the playoffs against the Kings, and are making the Kings sweat a little bit early on, going 1-1.
Yeah, the Mavs are hot, and their GM, he made a couple changes that have helped, like you said, and it's good to see, because they should have been better throughout the year than they were. Obviously, they didn't have a GM, but this is, the Mavericks are kind of on their last leg. They have one, maybe next season at most with this core, before they have to make serious changes. So I'm glad to see them doing well. And the Kings took a step back, trading Peyton. So it kind of opens it up for some other teams to step in. I still do think the Kings are, again, they're super talented, super deep. can throw a ton of different lineups at you. I don't think BT set a lineup for that one game that he lost, so it probably would still be 2-0 if he did that.
Yeah.
But I think the Kings are going to take it in like 6 again. But it's interesting that the Mavs are staying in there, so we'll see.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Kings will edge this one out. Probably, I think in 5 rather than 6. I can't necessarily see the Mavericks kind of getting another game now that BT's got a line up in. I guess the main reason is because for BT's benefit and great news for him, he finally has Russell Westbrook back and fit and healthy for a playoffs a run, which I think is going to be, yes, you mentioned they lost Peyton and that is a loss. They did get Rubio, who's still a very good defender, but getting Westbrook healthy and scoring and providing output is going to be great for them. And
yeah,
I kind of expect Sacramento to kind of edge through this one. But I think we need to give a bit of credit for the Mavericks GM who's come in. He's come in, plugged the lineup in, got them working, and kind of got them performing again. It's great to see, from my point of view, great to see a GM come in and not just make massive trades straight away when people are saying, "Oh, you've got to rebuild, you've got to rebuild." He's just come in, seen the team's fairly good, put them together, and getting the reward for it, a playoff run, which is great to see for a new GM.
yeah. No, I'm happy. I'm happy for the team and for the GM. It's sticking to it, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I agree. The Kings, I think, are going to take this in the end. They're just too talented.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then that sort of leads us on to the final round 1 matchup: the Houston Rockets against the Portland Trail Blazers. Probably if we'd have looked at this one 4 in-game months ago, the Rockets would have been the clear favourite because of the talent they had. They have had some horrific injuries, to say the least, that has turned probably a borderline title contender into a lower seeding playoff team, led by Malik Monk and then a collection of other players against the Trailblazers, who have come back into the playoffs, kind of business as usual, right amount of wins, mid-tier playoff team. Series is tied at 1-1. Malik Monk sort of going nuts in the first game, I believe, if I remember. And then the Trailblazers pulling them back in the second game. Where do you see this one going? Do you think Monk can pull a rabbit out of the hat for the Houston Rockets?
I think he might have one more rabbit, but that's about it. It's a shame that the Rockets that Kyrus's team is so banged up because they're a really good team he assembled. Next year they're gonna get even better. Monk getting an endurance boost, and just that whole team just getting more experience. I mean, your team, Portland, they're my pick to come out of the West personally. I think the Tavares move was a great move for you. You didn't give up too much, and he can make a big impact in a short period of time. He's not perfect, but he draws contact, which is huge when you're going up against other big-time centers. So I think you're going to pull this out. I do wish it was a more injury-free series, but that's just the nature of the engine, unfortunately. So I think you're going to pull it out, maybe in 5, maybe 6. But yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think you're going to take this one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be closer than people think. Malik Monk is a difficult player to stop. He can play multiple positions. He can shoot well against anyone, which is really tough. So if he carries on the form he was in game 1, we're going to struggle. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's going to be close, this one. And that kind of nicely ties off the first round matchups, really. And I'm sure we'll be back in future episodes to talk about the next round and how things go and who pulls out, who comes through, any surprises. I mean, just before we kind of wrap up and talk about some of the CSL awards voting, is there any team in here? I mean, we talked about the Hawks. Is there any team in here that you kind of see as the dark horse for either a conference berth or a possible title shout?
Yeah, I mean the Hawks I really like. The Cavs Josh could pull something out here if he gets through Boston. He would take on the winner of the Bulls and Pistons, and they could beat either of us or the Bulls if they're getting hot. I could see them pulling out and going to the finals in the West. I think it's kind of clear cut that the top four teams I think are going to get through, and then, like I said, I think you're going to pull out. You're my pick to get to the finals this year. Um, Maybe that's bias for getting a new champion every year, but yeah, I mean, I could. I don't know. Everyone's gunning for Andrew. I know that if anyone can take down Oklahoma City, they're going to throw a league-wide party.
Yeah, I mean, I think
um,
he's trying to deliberately
but
stir
yeah, it's
up
gonna.
some. He's deliberately trying to stir up some
Oh, definitely.
resentment. I
Yeah.
think it's quite funny, but I mean, you made an
Yeah.
interesting point. So we
It
haven't
is.
had a repeating champion before. So I guess if you take OKC out of that, I mean, looking at teams who haven't or GMs who haven't won a title, I mean, there's quite a few this year actually. Thinking about it, so I mean, obviously yourself and Marcus, one of you guys will get knocked out. OKC, the Suns obviously have won. The Kings have won. So it kind of leaves quite a few teams. I mean, in terms of the chances of us getting a new GM as a title in it, the odds are pretty good this year.
Yeah, definitely. It's great. Again, I like to see that. So, um, yeah, it'll be the West. There are more rings in the playoffs right now. I think Houston, Sacramento, like you said, Phoenix, Oklahoma City. Um, Denver has won a championship. It hasn't been Miles, but Denver has won a championship. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But if it's not the Pistons, I hope it's a new champion.
Yeah, let's hope so. It's always good to see a new champion. It keeps it fresh. But good luck to everyone in their
Yeah.
first round matchups, and we'll see how everything progresses in the playoffs. But the other thing that we kind of came on today to talk about was the CSL awards, which have gone up this couple of days ago, I believe, which is our sort of annual awards for the usual kind of suspects: MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Most Improved, Sixth Man, GM of the Year, Coach of the Year. I kind of wanted to wrap up this video cast really with John and just kind of get your picks for each award and why, and if there's anyone that is a close or honourable mention. I mean, have you voted yet, or are you still looking at voting in the coming weeks?
I have voted. I'll try to see if I remember them, but some of these are a little more clear cut, like you
Yeah,
said.
yeah.
Um, I mean, my MVP is Ben Simmons. I think he's a stud. He's young. He's a stud already. He's unique, and he's led Miami since he's joined that team to deep playoff berths and to a finals appearance already. So um, I think without them, I think Silo would still get a good performance out of that team, but he makes that team. It's a really hard matchup for any opposing player to try to go against him, and he's dominant on so many different levels that he's unreal. Kind of how good he is.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. MVP is probably the most obvious one. It has been in a while in terms of this award. For all the reasons you stated, really, I can't summarize that better. Simmons is just a unique player, and he drives that Miami Heat team forward. And they look like a title contender because of him, really.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So I guess in
I
terms of the other
think
ones,
outside of that, I mean, I think I had like Isaiah Taylor on there as my third list just because, again, he's so dominant. And that Phoenix team probably wouldn't be as good as they were without him. I mean, Isaiah Austin, again, is a very dominant player, but Isaiah Taylor does it at such a ridiculous efficiency for a guard that it makes that team so good. And he doesn't even shoot threes. Like that's the crazy part is he's not an efficient 3-point shooter. He doesn't shoot threes. He just can score at will at a ridiculously efficient rate, and I think it makes him almost like a James Harden type player, where he's just so dominant and makes such a huge impact for that team.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think the problem is with that one is that the Suns just have such a deep team anyway. He kind of, yes, we mention him quite a lot, but for other GMs just scanning through, he gets lost. I guess
Yeah.
the nice thing about that for the Suns is that they picked him up 21st in the draft, and a couple of seasons ago, and it's kind of helped them keep at the level they're at. Really, it's just he's just come out of nowhere. So yeah, he's a good shout. I mean, there's all the other usual suspects. I guess you could talk a little bit about James Harden, despite the Warriors not necessarily being an elite team. You can easily talk about Exum with the Hawks. I mean, you got other players like Jabari Parker, even though the 76ers haven't done very well this year. Uh, you know, Blake Griffin on the Cavs, still playing well. Fox on the Celtics probably deserves a slight mention, I think, this year. But I mean,
Yeah,
the
definitely.
clear one is Simmons, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's going to be Simmons. I think I might even put SJJ on there just because he puts up dominant numbers on the top team in the league. It's again, they're really deep though. They have a ton of talent, so it's kind of like an Isaiah Taylor kind of situation. But he puts up great numbers. He's not my type of player, but you can't deny the stats he puts up. So
yeah, no, I agree. So moving on to sort of the next one down on the list of voting, the Defensive Player of the Year. Who did you have for that one on your voting card?
I think I voted for Akaro, even though I really don't want to, but he's still top notch. Um, I'm trying to think who else I have on that list. Um, defender wise, um, yeah, I can't remember who else outside of Akaro White I
Yeah.
have as like the top defender.
So I'll tell you who I have. I haven't done my voting yet, but I'll tell you I have penciled in on mine.
Okay.
And he's topped by a country mile this year, which surprised me when I looked at the stats. Yes, we can all look at Akaro, and we know Akaro is a great defensive player, and yeah, his stop rate is great, his turnovers forced is great, but it's a bit boring to vote for him every year. But he's not actually the best defensive player this year, in my opinion. Lonzo Ball of the Philadelphia 76ers is to me is the best defensive player in the league. Just for the simple fact that his stop rate is 98% for a point guard, which is just brilliant, and his turnovers forced is higher than Okara's at 3.3. So he not only stops players, he also forces turnovers at a crazy rate. I mean, that's Okaro in his prime rate, that is. So for me, Lonzo
Yeah.
Ball, Defensive Player of the Year this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying. I think I had him maybe a second or third, and I also had Justice Winslow, who is a great defender and puts up some really good numbers from the forward position. He gets injured a decent amount, but he's another one. If you look at his numbers, he's pretty ridiculous across the board. How good he is defensively.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing that's going to hurt him this year is obviously he was injured for quite a large chunk of the start of the season. So, he's only played 53 games. It's whether that's enough necessarily to win the award. But yeah, he's probably worth a shout. But for me, I just think Lonzo Ball is the clear winner here. And anyone who listens to this, if there's one thing I can encourage you to do on your voting is vote Lonzo Ball Defensive Player of the Year. So should we have a look at Rookie of the Year? So there's been quite a lot of talk about this one because every GM's interested in rookies and enjoys the fun of seeing players develop. And it's been quite clear that there's been two favourites that have been neck and neck through the season for this one. Tatum and Bagley, Denver Nuggets and the Lakers respectively, have been the two that people have signified as sort of the two that are most worthy of the award. Where did you land on this one?
It's close. It's one of the closer ones we've had in a while. I did give the slight edge to Tatum on this one just because his impact on that team, I think, is far greater. I think he's had a really good year as a rookie. Bagley also had a really great year, and he's going to be a great player. Tatum, I think, got a +10 scoring boost, which he's just going to be unstoppable. And probably when we go to the new engine, he's going to be the best player in the league. But yeah, I think I fell a little bit heavier on Tatum in this one, and gave Bagley the second. And I think I fell with Trae Young as the third spot for this award.
Yeah, I agree with you. Probably Tatum edges it for me because of what you said, really. I think, similar to the draft, it's very similar to the draft discussion we had between the two, in that Tatum's probably the better player, only just, with Bagley being a close second. But, that's been reflective this year. And, yes, the Nuggets have a lot more talent on their roster than the Lakers do. But in terms of Tatum and
Right.
the scoring impact he's had, and just the defensive impact he's had, actually, he's been pretty good on that end. But just edges it for me.
Yeah. Same here.
So from the rookie of the year to the most improved player of the year, a contentious one, I think, this one, because from the discussion, a lot of GMs don't necessarily like voting for second-year players because that's when they get the boosts a lot of the time. So they go from a very raw prospect to the prospect the team originally drafted with the intention of. There's
Right.
quite a few
Yeah.
candidates this year, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, this is probably one of, like you said, it's pretty contentious. I think it's one of the better, more competitive awards we'll have. My vote did go to your guy, Henry Ellenson. I think he's really improved a lot. I didn't expect him to have the kind of year that he did. I think, and you'll have a better take on it than me, but this is his third season. I don't know what happened. If you put a lot of preference work into him, I'm sure you did, but it seems like he's a really big part of your team. It kind of took over for Muradic for you, and he seems like he's going to end up being a pretty good player in this league.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of Ellison. I think, we did do a lot of preference work on him. That was the one flaw that he had when we drafted him that we knew about, was that, he had a really good scoring touch inside, and he can hit a three fairly well. But the rest of his game is, in terms of shooting, the preferences were quite mixed. So there's a lot of work that was needed to do to kind of balance that out. So we've kind of spent the past 2 years working on him in that sense, which just kind of led to quite a nice situation in terms of, we had Mirotic injured for, I think, about 40 or 50 days with I think it was a broken elbow or something. And we kind of plugged Ellenson in and as kind of a trial to see how he got on, and he performed really well, which meant that we didn't necessarily need to bring Mirotic back. We could save him for the playoffs, which we have done. And he's performing to the levels we expected him. I had a lot of GMs actually, just on the side topic, ask me whether I had kind of misvalued Mirotic, but it wasn't a case of that. It was just a case of, well, Ellison's playing so well, we're doing okay. Why would I bother plugging in my second star player back in? Because I don't need to. I might as well keep him healthy.
Right.
So yeah, he's Ellison's caused us a few questions in terms of what we do when they're both healthy next year. But yeah, he's done really well. I mean, looking at other players on the list, there's quite a few. I mean, for me, I just looking down the list that you can vote for, there's quite a few I'd rule out straight away. So probably Collins, because he's a second-year player. Kawhi, because his stats I don't think his stats changed that much, if I remember, on OKC. Rozier, because he's changed team and he's got more responsibility now. Monk, we know, is just a ridiculous player. We can't leave him on most improved. That's just insane. Dozier, we can rule him out because he's on the Heat and he plays about 8 different positions. Ingram, I think, is a second-year player still. So kind of for me, it leaves a couple of players. It leaves Lowe, Maker, Edison, we've talked about, Weber, and Diallo. They're kind of the ones. And I'll leave Diallo in there. I think he's is he a second or third year player? I can't remember. I think
He's a third-year player.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
okay. So that's kind of where it sits. And I mean, I think I said it in one of the articles that came up in relation to this particular vote. For me, the one that surprised me when I was looking back through this, and I was like, oh, I didn't actually realize he had a really good season, was Lowe. In that, he's gone from what was a bench player playing 15 minutes approximately, to starting on the Knicks. Yeah, anyone can start on the Knicks this year. We know that, but his numbers are really good. 15 points per game, 4 assists, two and a bit rebounds. His turnovers are a good rate based on the minutes he's playing. And his 3-point shooting he doesn't take a lot, but it's solid. His field goal percentage, 45%, is good. He looks like he's gone from a player who probably would be washed up after the end of his rookie year to probably being a solid rotation piece for a lot of good teams now.
Yeah, definitely. He's a, 4th or 5th starter. He could be a top scorer off the bench. He's actually a legit player right now. He's had a really good year, and credit to Phil for giving him the time to kind of develop. And maybe I don't know if he worked on his preferences either, but his shooting percentages have been much improved. So yeah, Lowe's definitely in the running there. Diallo I think he was my 2nd or 3rd vote, just because he made huge strides in efficiency and just all across the board.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be an interesting litmus test for the league, Diallo, this year in terms of his free agency. So obviously, being a 2nd round pick, he's going to be unrestricted, and depends on where the Lakers go in the draft, to whether Diallo has a future with them, or whether he has the future that he wants with them, or whether he kind of gets snapped up by someone else who has a bit of cap room. And he to me he kind of signifies that he could be that sort of 5 to probably top end £7.5 million per year player, possibly. If he is a good defender, good rebounder. He shoots very well. He's not going to be a starter. He's going to be a rotation piece for a good team. But be interested to see where he goes. And as you said, John, he rightly deserves to be in the running for most improved player because of the progression he's had.
Yeah, no, he's definitely improved a lot. And yeah, I could see him he's either going to get way overpaid or probably way underpaid, to be quite honest. I don't know. Maybe he'll land somewhere in the middle, but I could see someone putting a lot of money just because he's 22 years old and the league's obsessed with youth right now. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I mean, even Maker, like Von Maker's a player, 3rd overall pick or something. He finally, I know Manu has put in a ton of work, preferences for him. And he had a good year last year. This year, he improved his field goal percentage a significant amount, and became a pretty big piece to that team. So they didn't win much, but he's a unique type of player. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, he's made progression again, and as you mentioned, Mano is putting a lot of progression work and a lot of preference work with him. For me, I voted for him last year for most improved player, I believe, or I can't remember where I put him, but I definitely voted for him. For me, I don't think the jump's been as big as some of the other players, but yeah, you can see he's naturally making the progression, and yeah, interesting to see what happens with him in free agency, being restricted, whether someone comes in for big money for him because of his age. He's only 22 years old, which is crazy.
Yeah, Yeah, he came into the league really young. He's kind of a polarizing player. Some guys think he's awful and was way overdrafted, and some people think he has a real place to be a different type of player in this league. So we'll see.
Yeah. The final player award, the Sixth Man of the Year award. I mean, I've got two off the top of my head that I would probably place as Sixth Man of the Year: Clay Thompson and Joshua Smith. And I think that was the same discussion I had last year.
Yeah,
Both on the top two teams in the league, both very valuable in their roles. Do you see anyone else sort of challenging for this award this year?
no, I mean, I had Clay one and Josh Smith too. I think, yeah, they're just even though again last year we talked about it, everyone thought Josh Smith was a starter, or Joshua Smith was a starter, but the way Silo plays him, he plays heavy minutes without starting him. So yeah, I think it's going to be a toss up between those two in the end.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think we can necessarily say too much on this really, apart from it's going to be one of those two. It's probably one of the easiest awards alongside the MVP this year.
Yeah.
So moving on to sort of the two important awards for GMs across the league, really. The GM of the year is the first one. I guess in terms of looking at moves and progression of teams, where did you land on this one?
I forget who I had 1, 2, 3, but I know I had Marcos in there for what he made some big moves for the Bulls to get them back to where they are. I want to say I had Josh because he took some risks trading Kyrie, and it worked out where he got some assets for the future and also is still competitive this year. So I think that's not a lot of GMs can do that, and it worked out really well for him. And I like the moves he made. And I don't forget if it was Miles or Andy. I want to say I had Miles in GM of the year, and I think I had Flaming Homer in for the one of the Coach of the Year awards. So I want to say it was Miles for the GM of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the three I've got down at the moment on my list. Miles, I agree with you in terms of the moves he's made to take that team from, yeah, yes, he had a little bit of luck with the draft last year, but in terms of taking that team from, he could have just happily drafted Tatum and carried on, middling away, but he's made some fantastic moves to take that team from a middling playoff team to probably pushing on the elite in the West now, which is great. Marcus and the transition he's made with that Bulls team has just been phenomenal. That team was bottom fodder when he took over really again, and he just transformed that team overnight pretty much. I think he did that in a space of 2 weeks, if I remember. Yep. I was sitting there on the forum thinking, oh my God, how on earth does he do it? But yeah, fantastic. And the other one I have down, Cleveland and Josh, I agree with you. He's made some great moves. But the other one I have down is Roxy and the Houston Rockets because of the Kemba Walker trade. And yeah, he's been unlucky with injuries this year, but that team has gone from, having Karl Anthony Towns and Monk, two young centerpieces. It's similar to probably just below Miami Heat, I guess, to taking on Kemba Walker. And if he can get those three working really well, then he's a title contender next year, that team. So the moves he's made have been brilliant.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, Kyrus made some really big moves, and if they were healthy, they'd be making a lot of noise in the playoffs this year.
Yeah. Sorry, not Roxy, Kyrus. God, I always get that muddled up. I just said Roxy, didn't I? Oh well, apologies, Kyrus. Yeah, we meant you. So, Coach of the Year is the other one, the final award this year, in terms of looking at how well our team has overperformed based on probably their ability. You mentioned Andy with the Hawks. Do you want to sort of elaborate a little bit more on why you kind of picked him?
Yeah, I think he just, like I said, for whatever reason, his team always performs really well at the end of the year. I think he has a talented team, but he's in a really difficult division. Orlando probably should be making the playoffs as well in that division. Obviously Gary's doing a good job with the Wizards, and then you have the Heat, but he almost overtook me for a top 3 team in the East towards the end because of how hot he was. So I think Andy's done a really good job with that team and has them in a good place moving forward. So
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he is the clear coach of the year this year. To get 51 wins with that team, and the form they're in and possible playoff noise they could make, yeah, absolutely clear coach of the year by a country mile. I mean, the only honourable mention I'd probably say is the Nets and how well they've done this year. Yes, they had managed to draft Aiton and have some good young players, but in terms of taking the team that was, I believe they were probably one of the bottom teams last year, I think, to almost cracking the playoffs in 1 year, is a fantastic bit of progression for them as well. But I do agree. I
yeah,
think the Hawks and Andy are probably the clear favourite, really, and the worthy winner of Coach of the Year.
yeah,
So yeah,
no,
vote for him.
Adam's done a good job. He used to not trade that much, and now he's finally got that trade itch. He's making a lot of trades. Um, he's done a good job with that team. I also always put Dennis in this award because I think Dennis is actually one of the better coaches in the league. He has a young team, and granted, they are really talented. But even when he doesn't have a talented team, he finds a way to still win. So he downplays it a little bit because he says he uses that light tactic of 1-5-1-1, but um, there's some there's something behind it that there is some truth to that working actually with this engine, and I think he knows that deep down. But um, I think he is one of the better coaches in the league and can adjust well in the playoffs, which makes him a difficult matchup every round.
Yeah. I mean, to get 55 wins whilst resting majority of your starters and not playing huge minutes is good effort from a coach and from a tactical point of view. So hopefully it pays off for them in the playoffs.
Yeah,
Cool. So I think that's kind of ended our sort of CSL awards for this year and a look at the playoffs. And it's going to be a fun one, I think, this playoffs. And lots of things are going to happen. I think there's going to be a few upsets we kind of mentioned. I guess anything to sort of say is John, thanks for coming on and best of luck with your series against the Chicago Bulls and the rest of the playoffs. Hopefully you can make some noise in the East.
yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on, and same for you. Like I said, you're my pick to come out of the West and probably win it this year. But you were also my pick last year and let me down. So hopefully
We'll
it.
see. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough. It'll be tough whoever wins it, really.
Yep.
But
Yeah. Whoever
it's going
wins
to be
it.
great to watch.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll see. It'll be a good luck to everyone in the playoffs, and even those out of the playoffs. The off season's right around the corner, so it's going to be interesting. The last off season with the old engine.
Yes, the last one, and the new free agency awaits us as well.
Yep, definitely. So exciting things coming up. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Chris. Seriously, this was good. I like doing these things. So
No problem. No problem.